All right, welcome to those of you who are entering the room at this moment. We're going to allow for students and families to enter our room and to enter this session. We are delighted to have you. We'll get started in a few moments. We have students from near and far joining us today. I looked at our attendee list. We have about 20 states represented across the country. We also have about 10 countries represented within the attendees as well. So great geographic diversity today, much like the great geographic diversity we have on our campus, made up of our current students. I've been traveling a little bit as I work for the admissions office, and I've been doing some high school visits and college fairs. And so I've run into some students who have been interested in analytics and immediately told them about this session. And every response I received was, I'm already signed up for that session. So I was glad to hear that word got out about what we had to offer tonight. So I am excited that this came to fruition and that we are now sharing this with all of you out there amongst the attendees. One of my colleagues, Associate Director of Admissions, Jen Iseth, is working behind the scenes with me today. She's helping out with the tech side of things as well as with Q&A. So for those of you who may have questions, please utilize our Q&A feature. You can ask questions at any point in time. My colleague Jen will help answer some of them. We'll also mark some of them for our panelists towards the end of our presentation. All right, so it looks like the majority of our students are in the room, so let's get started. Again, my name is Ken Sawada. I work as the Associate Director of Admissions at Syracuse University. Welcome to our session, Analytics at Syracuse. Our objective for today is for you to learn new and exciting opportunities to study analytics at Syracuse. We have a quick overview that we want to share with you first about Syracuse University in general. Then I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So let's begin. For those of you who this might be your first time attending a Syracuse session, so we do want to give you a little bit of background before we go into analytics. So let's start with our school color. It is orange, as you can probably tell by our slide. And it's more than just a color, it's a way of life for our students. 15,000 undergraduate students who are bold, passionate, and committed, not only in the classroom, but also on campus and in our local community. Kicking it off with academics, we have over 200 majors and 100 minors that we offer across 10 different schools and colleges that students can apply into. You can really craft your own path. One example is Cody, who's a recent graduate, majored in sport analytics, which is in Falk College. He also minored in economics, which is in our Maxwell School. Over half of our students are combining different programs at the university, either within their department or across the university. Dual programs are an option as well, so students can find those options on the Common App or on our website. We are an R1 research institution. It's the highest level that a university can be for research. We have 30 different research labs on campus, and students as early as freshman year can partake in these experiences. We have an office called The Source, where students can go to get paired up with a faculty mentor and also put in a proposal to request funding as well. Student life, we feel that we can provide an unsurpassed student experience for our students. Hands-on opportunities, I just mentioned research, also study abroad. We're nationally ranked for our abroad programs. We have 60 different locations that we work with, 100 programs in total. We have 5 university centers. So for example, SU in London, SU in Florence, Italy, are some examples of those. And we have semester-based programs as well as 2.5-week trips that are out there as well. We also have great events that take place on a daily basis. Just to give you an example, just yesterday, we had a Q&A in person with Michelle Santucci, recorded music lead for global music programs at Spotify. And that event was run through the Whitman School of Management. So just one example of some events taking place throughout the semester. We are a city of resources. We're in upstate New York. We are urban. We have the city of Syracuse that is right next door to us. So that brings us with service opportunities available for students, as well as internships. One example of internships, Sidearm Sports. I'm sure you're going to hear more about that in a second, but they're a software company that powers college athletics websites, including statistical integration. We have over 260,000 alumni worldwide. It is a powerful and passionate network. The majority of our students are receiving a job through an alumni connection that they've made during their time at Syracuse. So hopefully this gives you a quick overview, and do know that we have a plethora of virtual sessions available. You can register for those on our website. We also have in-person events such as open houses, or what we like to call orange previews. And there'll be several coming up both this month and in the month of November. All right, so with that, I would like to turn it over to our panelists. The first thing I want to share with you is that what we'd like to hear is, what does analytics mean to you and your specific school or college that you are in? So we are starting with the School of Information Studies, and I'm going to be handing this over to our associate professor and program director for applied data science, Dr. Jeff Saltz.
Thank you very much, Ken, and welcome everybody. So the School of Information Studies, which we like to call the Ischool, I thought I'd take just a minute to help people understand what that is and what we focus on. And really at a high level, what we think about, what we focus on, what we do research on, what we work with students on, is exploring kind of the intersection of technology, data, and society. And we have three majors at the undergraduate level. So the middle you can see there is information management technology, and that's really talking about how technology can be leveraged in a business context oftentimes. In addition, we have innovation society and technology. So that really definitely has a much broader perspective of how technology and how data impact society, and the other way around also, like how society can be benefited by technology in analysis of data. And then finally, obviously, the program that's nearest to my heart and probably of interest to people on this session is applied data analytics. And there we try to think about empowering data to drive decision-making. And so what we like to think about that as saying is, how can we use data to inform decisions across all types of organizations? And then we have to also think about that in kind of a sense of about how it impacts with society. And a different way to think about that is we like to think about human-centered analytics. So it's not just data and analytics, but it's how is that impacting people, and how can people be benefited through the use of analytics. If we think about the program a little bit more, we can kind of drive into it a little bit more detail. And I think that a couple of things, to point out maybe. So first is, when we think about analytics, we think about the full life cycle of trying to understand how to solve a problem for an organization, or maybe identify an opportunity for an organization. So that would include everything from working to understand what the problem is, working to understand what data might be available, then using different predictive algorithms to try to generate insight. And we like to use the word actionable insight as opposed to just insight. So understanding what might be really interesting and how that organization might use the analysis and insight and analytical decisions that we're kind of coming up with to generate that insight that's useful. Going down a little bit lower level, so we definitely teach students and we focus on some coding. Now, it's not like you're going to spend all day in front of a computer screen coding. That's not really how we think of analytics. But we do think that being able to get data and do some data munging, so to speak, is helpful. And so there's two programming languages that you'll be exposed to and you'll use to build these predictive algorithms. One's called R and the other one's called Python. and a little bit maybe to talk about math. So in our analytics program, it's important to understand probability and what that means, but we don't go into like in-depth mathematics. There's no like calculus or anything like that. So I think it's what I try to go over is intuitively explain how to understand the models and what they mean. And the other thing we go through in many of our courses is the ethical implications of these models. So fairness is a great example of that. So we might build a predictive algorithm, and there's a key question about, is that model fair? And there's certainly lots of definitions that are not fair, but there's also many potential definitions that might be fair. And so taking a step back, thinking about what fairness means, thinking about the different possible definitions of what might be useful, and having that discussion as one is building a model, as one is thinking about how to apply analytics, is how we kind of incorporate some of that human-centered analytics that I was talking about before. And so you can think about, once you get all this analytical knowledge, like where can you apply it? And I think one of the things the iSchool tries to do is set you up so that you can use it in a range of different contexts. So you can analyze consumer behavior. Obviously, that's oftentimes in a for-profit organization. You can think about it from a government policy perspective, whether that's trying to predict, COVID, for lack of a better word, because that's all in our mind, right? So you can think about it from that perspective, or government policy. And also just thinking about other not-for-profits that might be helpful, whether that's for community-based or whether that's for transportation or whatever the case might be. If we go to the next slide, we can kind of get a view of, I guess you can think about this as, where might you work once you've gone through this program? So the graduation, rate, about where the placement was, obviously this was during COVID, so I think it's a pretty high rate considering that kind of what was going on in the world at that time. And you can see some of the organizations. Some of them are obviously technology companies. There's Microsoft and Oracle there, IBM. There's a bunch of consulting organizations where our students go to. So represented here is Deloitte and Ernst & Young, EY. There's obviously social media companies and kind of web companies like Amazon, Facebook. You can see FBI over there, financial services companies, a whole really kind of suite. And the small company that you probably haven't heard of is Sidearm Sports, which Ken mentioned, and maybe I'll just spend a minute on Sidearm. So Sidearm Sports was started by an alum of the iSchool who's currently a faculty member. So he's been a faculty member here for forever, pretty much. Maybe 15, 20 years, I guess, by now. But he also runs Sidearm Sports, which provides websites for college sports. Over 1,000 universities now, I think his company supports. And the company is based in Syracuse, in downtown Syracuse is where many of his employees are based. But the company also hires many interns. So many of them are iSchool students, but not all. It could be from other colleges at Syracuse. We all are Syracuse. And so that gives you kind of a great insight into maybe a smaller company where you can work part-time while you're going to school, and seeing how analytics is used, seeing how streaming data is used, mobile apps for kind of sharing information about sports. So I think, the key takeaway here, and obviously many students like to work for bigger companies that pay lots of money, but kind of remember what I said before, there are other students that, think about working for not-for-profits or government agencies where, the use of analytics is just as important and just as relevant. And so I think, as we take a step back and think about it from an iSchool perspective, maybe one thing I'll just close with is, we are kind of all Syracuse University. So I think of myself as Syracuse University, and yes, I kind of associate with the iSchool, but, the classes we teach, Ken talked about minors. So I teach Introduction to Data Science, for example. And in that class, there's students from, all the different schools. So some of the students are in our program, some of them that are in our minors, and some of them just want to kind of get some exposure to it. So, I think Syracuse is great. Even if you're not sure exactly which one, my advice is don't worry about it. It's kind of, we're a family here. You can figure it out later.
Great. Thank you, Professor Saltz. I have, in the region that I work in, there are two alumni representatives I work closely with, Andy Addis and Neil Winston, both iSchool graduates, both wonderful, and also both interned with Sidearm Sports as well. So I had to share that. All right, so next up, we have the Whitman School of Management. We have Professor of Statistics, Analytics, and Data Science, Dr. Penelope Pooler. Welcome. Oh, Professor Pooler, oh, you need to unmute.
Hi, can everyone hear me now? Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Dr. Saltz, and welcome everyone. It's really wonderful to be speaking with all of you today. I have to say, I'm really excited to see all of the analytics that is at Syracuse University and is expanding very quickly. It's always been there, but it's really it's very exciting to see it all. And I mention that because I arrived at Syracuse University as a professor in 2016. Although I come from Syracuse, I moved away and came back. And in those years, we were tasked with developing a new major, which is now the business analytics major. And we are so very new. The Whitman program is very quantitative in nature. We have finance, we have accounting, supply chain management, which is all about logistics. And so, of course, all of these fields require good analytical skills. And so to support that and to meet the needs of this data-driven world, we have also developed a business analytics major. And so why, I think if you're here, you realize why that's important. But I also think since the pandemic is on all of our minds, as Dr. Saltz mentioned, understanding data and making good decisions based on data has never been more essential. And I think everybody now realizes that. I was recently talking to a client who said that data science is now the cool kid at the party, which was not something I ever heard when I was younger. So it's people now realize that you need to be able to look at data and understand the information you can get from it, both for to help people, to help your community, and obviously to help find a job. And so the Whitman program is inherently quantitative. In fact, we have two quantitative courses, not necessarily calculus based, but statistics courses, so that all of our students have a really good foundation in data literacy, is what I like to call it, so that even if they're not the one doing analyses, they can speak with somebody who is. And that's our freshman and sophomore sequence, MAS 261 and BUA 345. And then going beyond that, the analytics major, which is just over a year old, we just had our birthday, builds on that so that students know how to find and maintain data and visualize and communicate clearly. And we emphasize that the people who are our students who are taking these classes aren't just going to be analyzing data, but are going to learn how to communicate with those around them, their peers, their employers, their community, who aren't necessarily technical. So the key is to both be able to analyze data and to curate it for a non-technical audience so that you're making it accessible to the world around you, and helping everybody to make better business decisions and better decisions in general. Next slide, please. So the major consists of two required courses, One that the advanced business analytics, and then the course I am developing right now, which has been so much fun, and my students are so much fun to work with and to see them really bloom. And that's the data management for business course. And it's really data management and visualization. And then we have some electives, which are being launched as I speak. And they are really exciting to see what the professors have in store. And I mentioned there's also functional area electives, financial analytics and marketing analytics. And that's because our major, because the Whitman program, the School of Management, has a lot of quantitative aspects to our other majors, this major blends well with other majors, and among our students, it's very common to have them choose this as a double major, where they are doing, for example, supply chain management and analytics, or finance and analytics, without adding to their academic burden too much, and getting a lot of synergy between the different studies. Next slide. And so career prospects for BA majors, I don't actually, next time I do this, I will probably get more information on the companies that our graduates go to, but I'm so excited because our first batch of students who are completing this major are just graduating now and getting jobs. And it is so exciting to see them take on these roles. And I speak with all of them about the jobs they're getting in New York City, in Syracuse, and farther afield. And as I always tell them when people are deciding on this major is, I really believe if you have an analytical background, regardless of where you get it, if you have these technical skills and you have an analytical background, you really do have an advantage, because you can help other people with skills that they don't have. And I have found this throughout my own careers, that employers can teach you about their company. They can teach you about their company culture. They can teach you about, what their strategy is. But the analytical skills that we teach take much more time to master. And so if you have those skills, you have an advantage in terms of being appealing to employers. The other thing I really love about analytics, and it's why I've spent my career working as a statistician, is that we really are the original gig workers. We are the original consultants. I'm teaching my students this, is that if you can master these skills, if you have this understanding of data, you can help people, whether it be as a consultant, independently or within a company, or pro bono. You have skills that you can offer people, and you have lots of flexibility and options for branching out. You can take on clients, you can pare down. It's really just, it's a skill set that's very valuable. And you're also sought out to teach, to advise, to analyze, and help people. And I think that's what makes it so exciting for me, is that I genuinely like helping people solve their problems, and having analytical skills allows you to do that. And then, of course, if you have, if you are interested in grad school, which I know is a long way off for many of you, having an analytical background opens those doors as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Professor Pooler. I agree with what you mentioned about the flexibility of the curriculum. I think the percentage last I heard was about 50 to 75% of our students in the business school had double majors. So that flexibility is quite incredible. I did want to share something real quick for the business school. There was a student I had interviewed recently. His name was Alex, and he had, after the Whitman tour, had questions about business analytics. So the tour guide had spent an additional 30 minutes with Alex and his father to speak more about the program. Alex's first choice is now Syracuse, so just wanted to give you some feedback on the tour guides in Whitman.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right, so let's move on to our next speaker. He is a professor, sports economist, and director of the Sport Analytics program from the Falk College of Sport and Human Dynamics. We have Professor Rodney Paul.
Ken, thank you very much. Appreciate this, and I appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much for showing interest in our university and in our programs. We are super excited about the future in moving in all these different directions and all the different things you hear with analytics and the different ways that you can be able to mix and match different things together. It's a super exciting time, and look forward to hopefully seeing many of you in the future. Our program is new as well. We just graduated our first full class this past May. So this is a rather recent innovation from us as well. We kind of had started this just on kind of out of the blue. I had started a Sabre Club when I came here, which is Society of American Baseball Research. And we had the students do a research project, and we got into MIT Sloan Sport Analytics Conference, which is kind of the biggest sport analytics conference that's out there in the world. And ESPN, the magazine, picked up on it afterwards and did an article on it. And next thing you know, I was being asked to develop a program. So that's kind of the evolution of where this came from. And we couldn't be more excited. It's a matter of that we love the students that we have, and just a tremendous group of talent that we have with us. In terms of the program itself, in terms of designing it, wanted to be able to do analytics from both the player and team side, which you might be familiar with from Moneyball and all the associated things with that, and what you see on the sports telecast in terms of the different, data-driven things that they're using on the field or on the court, etc. But we also mix that with the business side of sports to be able to look at what happens from the league level, the team level, all the technology companies that support sports, etc. So I stole from baseball in terms of being able to design this, and had our own 5-tool prospect. And our 5 tools, first of all, is mathematics. Our students take as high level math as we can. We get them through advanced calculus, linear algebra, etc., to help them with the modeling in addition to statistics. Second part is the computer side, the coding, etc. We also go heavily into R and Python because that's what the teams use. So teams generally go ahead and be able to use both. Some just use one or the other, but many of them use both in terms of their practice. We also have the business side that we do both a little bit in-house as some of our courses, and in terms of outside, that being able to work with the other areas around campus that have been just wonderful to us to be able to partner with. My background's in econ, so I'm a little bit biased toward that. Plus, we want our students to be able to get to game theory. So we make them take enough econ to be able to take game theory, because that's so important to so many aspects of sports. But we also have finance, accounting, management, marketing, etc. within the discipline. Another part that was also mentioned before that's really important is communications. It's one thing to be able to crunch the numbers, be able to get the data, be able to predict something, but if you can't explain it to someone, you're not going to be able to be useful as you could be in terms of this. And so in sports, you'll be talking to coaches and trainers, etc., to be able to get this point across, and they might have no background whatsoever. So we work on trying to get our students in front of many different groups, get them out there to competitions, get them out there to conferences, etc., to get experience being able to communicate. I was working for the NHL and bringing the minor league teams out west when they formed the Pacific Division, and the stunning memory of after going through this whole model I was really happy with as to what cities made sense and why. One of the GMs put his arm around me and said, "We've never looked at things like that before. We don't do things like that." And at that point, I realized that there's got to be many different ways to communicate to many different groups. groups. So we try to be able to expose our students to as many different elements of the sports business and the people they could talk to as possible. And then since this is all skill-based, as people also had mentioned before in their programs, we also require a foreign language to be able to add another skill to the resume. This kind of paid off immediately, and one of our first graduates was hired by the Pittsburgh Pirates. He immediately was sent to winter ball, be able to, he's fluent in Spanish, and was able to communicate with players and coaches there. And that was his first assignment when they hired him. So we have students that be able to, like into soccer, that might be able to emphasize Portuguese, things like that within the program. Next slide, please. So within our in-house, in terms of what we teach, as I mentioned, we have the R and the Python class. We have 2 sport economics classes that cover things that are more specific to sports, such as competitive balance, et cetera, that you might not worry about too much in other areas, uncertainty of outcome, et cetera. We have our 2-part sport data analysis sequence. One I kind of think about more as linear algebra, econometric based, the other being a more machine learning based. So we approached different problems from, or the same problem even, from different ways to be able to analyze models, et cetera. And everything that we do builds toward the thesis. As you can see, we don't have courses in, say, baseball analytics or football analytics, et cetera. We have very, very active clubs. I had mentioned earlier, this all sprung out of a baseball analytics club that was formed. We now have analytics clubs for virtually any sport that you can think of that meet virtually every night of the week. So our students get together there. They don't only get to talk about the sport and what's going on, but they're heavily encouraged to do research. And we get them to be able to submit that research and be able to get out there and be able to present it and be able to, try to get an audience to be able to understand and buy into what they're doing. So we've had a lot of success with that in recent times. And that group research prepares them for the individual research. And they do that as a senior, where they can focus on the sport of their choice or some particular element of sports that might compare to sports, et cetera, to be able to work with that. So we have partners on that work with us in class, or basically in groups outside of class. We work with a bunch of teams on campus, lacrosse, soccer, hockey, etc. We have people with the basketball team that are able to develop projects there. We work with a team out of Switzerland that basically outsources their analytics to us to be able to analyze. A performance company called Edge 10 that has an in-class project that gets to work on. And we also just recently partnered with the business side of SU Athletics to undertake 5 projects this particular semester that we're starting on, that students at any level, whether they're freshmen or all the way up to seniors, will go ahead and be able to take part in. So we're excited about that possibility. We're super excited that our students have been very successful. We've had back-to-back students be able to get into MIT Sloan with their research, had their research accepted. One of them actually wound up winning Best Poster. That was up there and was a finalist of Best Paper overall as an undergrad, but we also go ahead and be able to have gotten to many others there as well. Plus, we are able to due to a generous gift to the program, get students to competitions, and we've been very successful in the SABRE analytics competition that they have, that when we can, at least we've gone out to Arizona to be able to compete in that during spring training. So those are the ways that we work on communications, is by being able to try to get the students to as many of those type of events as possible. Next slide, please. And then that takes us to where we're at. We only have not too many graduates so far, given that we've just gone through our first cycle. We only had 4 that kind of were able to graduate early from this. And after me being able to tell all the students in the program that you can't just focus on teams, you have to think about all these other companies that might be related to sports, all 4 landed with teams. And so that kind of made my job harder to be able to sell that these departments are rather small and not everybody's going to wind up with a team. But of the little bit fewer than 40 graduates that we have out there, we have 8 currently with teams. The one at the Astros just was featured today in Baseball America. She was first female graduate from our program, and the interview with her is up on Baseball America's website today. We've also had good work of getting students within the new, rising daily fantasy wagering world. So FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, etc. have been places that not only have placed students, but we've had many internships in the last summers to that. And as was kind of mentioned at the start, we have students that also go non-sports after this into a variety of different places that have been able to take these skills, which are transferable. And that's so nice about this, that if you get these type of skills and you find an interest that you like, you can apply it to that. We love sports, so we get to apply it to sports, but you can apply it to anything that you want to. And as was mentioned by the previous speakers, if you have these type of skills, it really allows you so many things that you can pursue and look into to be able to help so many people, so many companies, countries, whatever that goes ahead and gets to be. So people sometimes, you get scared of mathematics and get scared of numbers and graphs and things because people might tell young people that it's difficult, etc. And I can't imagine a bigger disservice in society than those type of things happening. But we have a lot of fun with that, and it sounds the same in the other programs as well. So, thank you again so much for your time tonight, and always happy to answer anyone's questions at any time. Thank you. Thanks, Ken.
All right. Thank you, Professor Paul. I had the honor of sitting in on one of your sessions during an Orange preview a few years ago, and I had listened to one of the students presenting their research project that they were working on, which was looking for a correlation between the brand of basketball utilized by a specific college and the points per game average. So that stuff is absolutely interesting to me. It was a very memorable presentation that you and the student had put on. All right, so now what we'd like to do is open it up to questions. So feel free to throw any questions into the Q&A, and the questions can be for individual members of our panel, or they can be for the entire panel as a whole. And it looks like there is a question that came in, so I'm going to read that out loud in a second. First, I do want to introduce a couple of other staff members who are here with us. For the School of Information Studies, we do have recruiting specialist Ian Richardson here. And for the Whitman School of Management, we do have the Director of Undergraduate Recruitment, Rachel Dubois, here as well. The first question that came in was for Professor Paul. So this is coming from Sebastian, and this question asks, hello, is it possible to mention examples of how sport analytics in any way intertwine with the sport management degree?
Sure. We are housed with sport management, so there's a lot of overlap between that. In the way that the programs were designed as of right now, we do not have the possibility of a double major, but we do wind up with many minors in going in both directions. So we have sport management students that wind up with sport analytics minors and vice versa. So just the way that the program was designed credit-wise, it didn't quite work out for double majors, mainly because ours has the thesis, and the sport management degree has their capstone. So it would almost be really almost impossible, I think, to be able to do both. So that's a little bit tricky measure on there. But no, we do interact with that. We share an advisory board that people in the sport management field, go ahead and be able to speak to our students as well. So it's a really nice, interaction between the two. And there's ways to be able to get elements of both within the degree.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to go to Professor Pooler next. For the business analytics degree, is a background in coding needed or recommended? And don't forget to unmute too.
Thank you for that question. And that's a good question that I always I'm actually answering every day with my students. We introduce coding in our, or at least expose students to coding in our required courses in Whitman, but we don't expect them to necessarily go beyond the basics. And then once you get into the analytics major, having some coding background is always helpful, but we teach our classes as if you don't have it yet. Um, my students will tell you they want more coding experience. But what I tell them and what I'll tell you is that, first of all, I think coding is really a wonderful and important skill. It's not the only skill for analytics, but it is a good one. It's like having the right tool for the job. And in this day and age, when it's so common and popular, I mean, you noticed all three of us mentioned R or Python or both, is that there's resources available. You can just about all of the state-of-the-art textbooks are available free online because the software is changing so quickly that the authors realize that. And SU has this wonderful, wonderful resource. They partnered with LinkedIn, and the LinkedIn learning tutorials, I've explored a lot of them for my students, and I'm really impressed with how well they can help students get started. And I can't emphasize that enough. Between that and Data Camp and other resources, just about anybody can get started. That doesn't mean you have the analytical skills, but you can get that coding background to augment or sort of ease yourself into an analytics learning situation. And then what we as professors in any one of these majors will do, we'll teach you those skills and build on that so that you're not just coding, you're not just sitting at a keyboard, you're understanding why you're doing it so that you can help answer good questions in a interesting way to help people.
Great, thank you. Professor Saltz, I have a question for you. Just with the program being new, what's the type of student that you're looking for? What are some characteristics that you're looking for in a student who will ultimately be successful in your program and in the School of Information Studies?
That's a great question. I think it's really about interest and attitude. I think even back to what was previously discussed about coding. So there's certainly no prerequisites in terms of coding experience that's necessary before you enter the program. The program is set up so that you'll learn it through the program by doing things. And that's true whether it's mathematics or whether it's coding or whether it's statistics or whatever the case might be. And so I think what we're looking for are people that have a passion for how to apply data in different contexts, and which was mentioned by kind of all three of us, which is it's not just to do the analysis, but it's to explain to somebody what it means and then what can be actionable about that. So I like to kind of always explain to people, so you can give insights that are interesting, but if they're just interesting and you can't do something with it, whether it's telling a player how to do something or advising a coach or advising a business or advising a not-for-profit, if it's just interesting insight, it's actually almost not as useful, certainly not as useful as something that you can do something with, depending on the context. And so, I think what we're looking for is people that have an interest in that, have an interest in trying to, for lack of a better word, change the world by leveraging data in whatever context they deem interesting.
All right, great, thank you, Professor Saltz. Let's go back to Professor Paul. We've got a question about the 4+1 program in sport analytics. The 4+1 program, could you please talk about that?
Yeah, that's we work with the Ischool, which has been just wonderful. It's a matter of that the students then be able to stay for the graduate degree, master's degree with the Ischool, and we have students that absolutely love it. I mean, it's a matter of that you get to I get to talk with many of them, on a regular basis that are still in house, basically being here, and it's just a wonderful opportunity of the skills they pick up there, and it's so nice because you can be able to, get that adjustment, directly from, from our program into theirs, being able to work with that. We've also been, a lot of our students with the credits that they bring in, a fair number right now that are in that have graduated from us in 3 years and are now being able to spend that additional year with the iSchool as their 4th year. So that's been really even better than I could have imagined, but it's been terrific for us, and really goes ahead and is something that is a great opportunity for people that are interested on these lines. So we're really thankful to the iSchool for that, and it's been terrific for us.
Going back to Professor Paul, are there any possibilities of an internship or any connection to the NBA through the sports analytics course? This is coming from an aspiring MBA broadcaster, Gabriel.
Some of our first graduates, and I don't think we have one this past year, but earlier, were combined in terms of broadcasting and in terms of the sport analytics program. So they had an interest in terms of that. They did not wind up working in broadcasting. We've had some minors that have. We have just, again, they're very young in their career, but like, regional kind of sports broadcasters that have gotten jobs that's, try to use it a bit in terms of what they are able to do on air. So we don't necessarily have any kind of direct, connection, to that in terms of the things that we're doing, but would love those type of possibilities. Had a discussion with an alum that's very, very much cares about the university, that was mentioning would love to be able to find a way to be able to mix the analytics, more with broadcasting and with anything along those lines. So maybe we'll see those type of things in the future, which would be wonderful.
Thank you. It does feel like possibilities are endless through analytics. Professor Pooler, a question came in from Hannah. The question is, do you need to have taken calculus to get into the business analytics program?
This may be, for the business analytics program, I would say no. Rachel DuBois, who's also here, may know more about the requirements for entering Whitman as a student, but having an understanding of calculus is helpful for an analyst, for a data scientist in general, but it's not required on a day-to-day basis for what we teach. I obviously really like math, and I think it helps with a deeper understanding. But I'm also intrigued by how analytics and data science are trending as a field. Modeling, all of that. The more you understand about the underlying math, the better. But you don't have to start there, right? You need to start with understanding the data and understanding the questions being asked. And then depending on the particular task or the particular course, how much of a deeper understanding really depends on the question. So the courses we're teaching don't require it, at least in the business analytics program. But I'll let Rachel speak about the Whitman admissions process for a minute.
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. So pre-calculus is required prior to admission into Whitman and Syracuse, and then business calculus is taken as a part of our curriculum. So it hopefully does translate to some extent, but yes, may not be used day to day, but it is required at some point to graduate, usually taken in the first year for students. So that's in most cases before starting the major.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Question for Professor Paul. Let's go to this one here. I'm curious about how this is from Martha. I'm curious about how the other more human service focused majors within Falk might interact. Did we lose it? Yeah. Curious about how the other more human service focused majors in Falk might interact with the sport analytics major. I really like that the public health and social work majors are in the same school. It's unusual.
Yeah, we're really trying to find ways to be able to branch this out in different directions. And there's great opportunities with that, with the thesis. And that's where we found right now the most possibilities. You know, whether probably the most natural connection I think that we found so far is with nutrition and those similar programs that are there. But there are ways to be able to branch out with that. Now, one of the things I think that's really helped that is that when after the program was designed, I was reached out to by Dr. Robbie Sika, who used to be head of analytics at Mayo Clinic, vice president, Minnesota Timberwolves. Just an incredible person in terms of all the things that he's been able to do. He teaches a course for us basically about player health and rehabilitation and valuing those things, mainly focused on the NBA with what he does. And through that, we found ways through the rest of Falk that people came to hear him speak. And then we thought of different ways to be able to branch that out that, very different than anything that I had thought of, from my background. So I think the more people that we bring in, the more ways that we can branch that out, the more opportunities there will be. And really, like, the thesis option provides us so many things that we can do, because I just want the students to follow their passion. So whatever that goes ahead and gets to be is something that we can be able to make it work. It's not like we say, oh, it has to be in this particular sport or other things like that. We have, students right now, thesis wise, being able to look at things like youth participation, etc. So there's lots of different angles that can be done there, and I think hopefully we can answer that question better in a few more years as we build this out more. But it's definitely something that is starting to rear its head, and hopefully will be able to be even more so in the near future.
Great, thank you. I'm going to start with Professor Saltz on this one. This is going to be for the entire panel. So this is from Will, and we'll go with Professor Saltz first, then Professor Pooler, then Professor Paul. Are there internship requirements or co-op requirements? Let me just pull that back. Where did it go? Hold on one second. We have, okay. From Will, are there internship requirements or co-op requirements? If not, does the university help students obtain internships or co-ops?
Yeah, so I think I'll certainly give my impression, and I'm curious to hear others as well. So I would say that we strongly encourage internships, but do not require them. And we do a lot both at the iSchool level, I'm sure all the other schools do as well as the university does, in terms of helping students get placement. So, speaking for the iSchool, I talked a little bit before about, the placement rate in the different companies. So that starts really during internships, because a lot of companies actually do their hiring via internships. So a lot of companies hire you as an intern, and then if things work out well on both sides, they'll give you an offer, and kind of you have a lot more time to see and understand the company, what the culture is at that company. And so rather than relying on a day or two of interviews, companies often try to rely on a 10-week internship, for example. So it's a key part of many of our students. It's not required, but again, it's something that we strive to enable all students to do if they want to do it.
I agree exactly with what Dr. Saltz just said. And I have to say, one of the things that most impresses me about Whitman is how impressive and hardworking our career services office is, and our career services staff is, both in helping match students with great internship and employment prospects. So many of our students, it is absolutely not required, but it is strongly encouraged. I don't think it's required. Rachel can correct me on that if I'm wrong.
One is required.
One internship is required. Thank you for letting me know that. And our students work they do such a good job of, they are so excited about these opportunities, and I think they learn from them, and it really augments their learning and their experience at Whitman. Um, and uh, as Dr. Saltz said, they really help both the employer and the student decide if this is a good match for you, career-wise, um, task-wise. It's just exciting to see students come back from these opportunities and see what they've learned.
From our perspective, we do not have a requirement, but it is heavily encouraged. We have usually early on, we encourage, unless they could find something directly sports locally, that if they could find something non-sports, that they can bring something back that then they can apply to sports is kind of something we like to be able to encourage early on. But we had a lot during this past summer. I was just giving a presentation this morning and I had that slide, but I didn't have it here. But there's a lot of different places that people go. We have a terrific intern coordinator that really helps with all of that, being able to match up the inquiries. And some of that, again, comes from our advisory board, and not just their companies, but the places that they have connections with to be able to talk to. So we do not require that, but the majority of our students have probably at least 2 of the summers where that works out to be able to do that. And as was mentioned before, it also is a way that we just had a student that worked in analytics for Dick's Sporting Goods this summer who just accepted a job that was offered to him, post graduation. So those type of things happen as well. So yeah, we encourage it, but we do not have a requirement on the books that says that you must.
All right, thank you to the entire panel for the answer to that question. I'm going to go back to Professor Saltz. This question came in earlier and just want to share this with you. So could Professor Saltz provide an example of a specific application of the skills acquired that a graduate of the School of Information Studies might work on?
Sure. I mean, the list is almost so long, but maybe I'll try to give one that everybody can relate to. So I think everybody's familiar with Netflix. And when you kind of are just sitting there watching Netflix, at the end of your show, Netflix will suggest, would you like to watch this other show? So that's an example of using analytics and data science. There's lots of different techniques that can go into driving that suggestion. But that suggestion is customized to what you've watched, learning what other people have watched as well that are similar to you. So that's kind of a simple example that I think everybody can relate to. But there's lots of other scenarios that that are kind of similar in nature to how that's done. But analytics is used in pretty much, it's very pervasive in industry. It's very pervasive. So I talk for not-for-profits. You can think about analytics being used in terms of trying to identify potential donors. You can think of analytics being used to try to optimize and explore the impact of, for example, pedestrian zones versus where buses go versus where cars go. So it's just mention those 2 as extreme examples, but pretty much everything we do generates data, and we can analyze that data to get additional insight.
And I have a second part to that question. It is, how quantitative is the data analytics program in the iSchool? So
what I would say is that the analytics program is as mathematically oriented as a student wants. So if a student wants to take advanced math, that certainly can be part of the program. Some students kind of are interested in really kind of advanced mathematics. And as you've heard from the other faculty members here, that can be very useful. But we also have students that want to, for lots of different reasons, want to focus on the applied nature of how to apply analytics. And in that situation, there's the math that's being taught is being taught at an intuitive level. So yes, you do have to understand probability and what's the chance of this model working or not. But we teach it in a way that is intuitively understanding as opposed to deep mathematics. So what I would tell students that are thinking of The program in the iSchool is mathematics should not be a barrier to you kind of entering the program or completing the program. You'll do just fine.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Professor Pooler, we'll do 2 more questions. Professor Pooler, how does Syracuse view data analytics versus data science? Are they different or are they one and the same?
I love this question. This is something I talk about with my colleagues all the time. I finished my degree a couple decades ago, and at the time the word analytics didn't exist. I have a degree in statistics, and at the time we were amazed that people were using the word analytics. It was sort of a made-up word. And now it's the name of my major. And in the ensuing years, the term data science has come into popularity. And I was so puzzled by these terms, which this is how I actually met Dr. Saltz. I wasn't sure where I fit in to this whole new framework of analytics and data science as somebody who graduated a couple decades ago. And I actually took his course, which I thought was wonderful, by the way. And what I learned is that whether you are a statistician or have a degree in analytics or you have a degree in data science, there's a lot of overlap between these terms, and it's really how you approach data. Whether you come at it from a more mathematical bent, and we also have an arts and sciences applied statistics degree, or you come at it from a more applied bent, where you're not necessarily concerned about the deep underlying calculus. The goal should always be the same, which is to provide good answers to people. I think there's so much overlap between these terms in terms of the fields that it's hard to define them. Different articles will make differences between them, just like different proponents will argue for R or Python. But the more you know about being a good analyst or data scientist, the more you realize that the terminology, there's so much overlap that the terminology isn't as essential as providing good answers from data, is the best way I can put it.
Great, thank you. And then one last question for Professor Paul. I know we have Game 5 coming up, Giants Dodgers in a second here. Do you expect an increase in the popularity of sports analytics focused studies in the near future?
Yes, I expect there to be an increase. I think that, we're probably already there in terms of what you see on the broadcasts, et cetera, that has expanded, to all of that. We've expanded beyond Moneyball in the sense that, this doesn't work in the playoffs, although I guess you could, attribute that to the Rays as well, in terms of probably who are the best at being able to do this baseball wise, I would think. But yeah, it really then depends on if the industry expands at the same rate, et cetera, So if you're thinking about this from the perspective of, working for teams, I can tell you from our, one student that's in the NFL that the number of analytics staff is fewer than the number of running backs on the roster. Okay, so it's a matter of, you're not talking very many people here that are working in terms of some of these particular groups. So I think it really depends upon that. My biggest hope, or I think where we'd be really well positioned, is if colleges expand their analytics departments for their sports. If that happens, then I think there's tons of things that open up. Very few colleges are actually doing that at the again, in terms of the revenue generating sports being football and basketball. But yeah, if that expands, then I think you're going to go ahead and be able to see even more of a big gain. But there's so many technology companies out there and so many places that consult that relate to sports and sponsorship and activation and advertising, etc. There's lots of ways to be able to go there, and that depends upon how many fans still want to follow sports, and that doesn't seem to necessarily go away, we hope. So something I would hope for to be around for a long, long time, if not forever.
All right, that was a great way to wrap it up. First and foremost, I just want to let you know, personally, this was a blast for me. In admissions, we use data on a daily basis. And as a sports fan, also, I am incredibly grateful for analytics and the increased implementation of it. Thank you to our panelists, Dr. Paul, Dr. Saltz, and Dr. Pooler, as well as Rachel and Ian for being on the call tonight. Thank you for your time. To all of our attendees, please reach out to us if you have any additional questions. Thank you for attending our session tonight. Have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, wherever you're from right now, and go Orange.